life of Christ Jesus, the works and life and works of Jesus Christ. This is our week number 3 already. Yeah. And we continue our discussion about how do we read a narrative, especially focusing on the characters. This is a kind of character study, character being Jesus Christ, the main character of full gospel. So to study life and the works of Christ Jesus, main literature that we have today will be full gospels, plus there are some extra works, but those are not the detailed description of who Jesus is, but it will be a sentence or two or a little more than that. So understanding, to understand a narrative, you are to understand episode and characters. So character comes as the main ingredient for making a story, a narrative. And when you have a story, a narrative, which is a story with a message, according to my definition, or a story with lessons, a narrative is designed to communicate the idea or message, the lesson, to the readers or listeners. So when you are reading a narrative or a story, you expect to have the author's intention, the intended message in the story. So there will be the basic starting point. So when there is a author or writer with a intention, he or she, the writer, the author, will have a perspective. Perspective is how you see the reality. Or in our case, how do we see the characters? How do we interpret the episode? So we are looking at the reality called a narrative. In that narrative, we will have character and episode. And there is a interpretation, whether it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. These writers of 4 different gospels have 4 different perspectives. How they understood and focused and interpreted the story, the character, and episode. So we were in discussion about perspectives, how the author described, understood, interpreted what the character did or done, and including the relationship and the words. So, first item that we stopped discuss in last lesson, week number 2 is God versus man. So when you read the Bible, you have to be careful. The Bible, because it's the Bible, you may assume that everything that is written in the Bible, including story or even revelations, you may assume that it is all godly perspective or perspective of God. But in truth, it does include some human perspective, and even in the story, the characters says the things that he or she wants to say, and then that in that saying is human perspective, and God can give you interpretation about what he or she did and said, or he may not. So your job as the reader or the student of Bible, you are to distinguish whether this is God's perspective or man's perspective before you go into the interpretation and an understanding of the author. Because the author, whether it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they act as a reporter. Reporter is like a reporter today. When there's a news, the reporter goes to the place and then he or she reports about the incident, what had happened. And they do it by when, where, what happened, why it happened, who are involved, and so on. So there are certain framework that they follow to report. Same thing. First, the narrative in the gospel of Jesus, or the story of Jesus Christ as the Messiah, it begins with the presentation of facts. So when you read the story, there are things that happen as it is. There's no interpretation about it. And it says Jesus walked on the water, the lake of Galilee. And that's what the fact is. There's no interpretation about it. And when you read that statement, Jesus walked on the water, the question comes up, is it true or is it not? Is it a made up story? Or is Peter and all the disciples were kind of hallucinating? These are some of the questions that you might want to ask and try to, make a search on it, elaborate on it. But before you begin elaborating on the statement is there, and the job of a reporter is to report what he or she has seen. So in that, first is whether it's godly perspective or human perspective. Second line says first, second, or third. Any stories, dramas, or movies, it is written with either I perspective, meaning that you write it as your own experience. It is something that you have experienced. So that's first person perspective, so-called first person perspective. It's I who is the character. I mean, it can be the character, but it is I who's writing about my own experience. The second person is you are a character in the story, but the main character is there, and then you are the second person, the observer. So that's second person perspective. And the third person perspective would be you are like all knowing and everything, and your perspective, your knowledge and your presence is not limited. So that is called third person perspective. Most of Gospels are written with a third person perspective. Line number 3, objective or subjective. Usually the news reporters are asked to be objective, meaning to be fair to the readers and the audience, not inclining to a certain perspective or group of people or viewpoint. That's being objective. Subjective means you take a part, or you take a certain position or a certain stand, and you are making a critical, judgmental attitude and the perspective on the characters or episode. So in this case, you are being subjective. You have your own opinion, your own idea, your own stand. And so, for example, in politics, in America, there's a Republicans and there are Democrats. Democrats and Republican does not share the same values. They have different positions. So when you're a Republican, you have your own subjective idea about how the nation and the government should be like. And if you're a Democrat, you have, again, very different idea than Republicans. So that cases, they are being subjective. The Bible is a subjective writing. It's not trying to be objective. So the writers in the Bible, the Gospel, 4 Gospels, when they write about Jesus Christ, they have their own perspective and belief. And they write it from their position. So we can safely say the Bible, 4 Gospels, are very subjective literature. Because it is subjective literature, you are asking about the authenticity. You're asking whether this subjective literature that we are reading is authentic, meaning whether it's true or not, whether it's made up or blown up, exaggerate or not. And if it's exaggerate and if it's falsified, meaning they kind of twisted the facts and presented it in the very different than what had happened, it does not have authenticity. Then you don't, the validity of the things that are written, meaning that validity means whether it's true or not, cannot be established. So the story is a myth or fantasy or made up stories. and then there's no reason to study it. No reason. I mean, even though Bible is a very subjective writing, and especially the gospel, when we're talking about gospel is a very subjective writing. Yet, unless you acquire this authenticity and validity of the writings, that subjective writings, then it is not going to be acceptable as genuine, valuable, worthy literature to study as a history material. So here's the question: whether is it whether the story, the gospel, full gospel, whether is it historical or is it not? History should be based on the actual real facts. If it's not, we don't say it's a history, it's a myth, and or fantasies. Even though those are narratives, of course, these are narratives, but made up stories, myths, fantasies are not historical. But we believe, the Christians, we believe the full Gospels are historical, meaning it's true to fact and it's authentic. What is written in there in the Gospel are true. So that would be open to discussion or debate. Still, we Christians believe that it is true. And if you are not a Christian, and if you're studying this gospel and the story of Jesus as a non-believer, that's still okay. Then you'll try to ask, not just the contents itself, but you're going to keep asking whether this story is true or not. That will be another object or the goal of studying the gospel for non-believers. But as for the believers, you already accept the Bible as a true historical statement, and the gospel also it is the record of what really happened. That's how we perceive. So we don't ask the question whether it's true or not, or whether it's historical, authentic, or valid, and so on. But non-believers should continue to ask the question as you read and study the gospel and the life of Jesus and what he said and what he did and how he lived. Gonna ask, is this true? Is this real? That's gonna be the question. Mine or theirs? We will just skip that one. Perspective, continue. Neutral or objective? We already. Here's one thing. Many people think being neutral would give him or her the objectivity, being the authentic and true. But that's not always the case. And to be technical, there's no literature. Let's exclude the scientific literature like physics and chemistry and so on. They could be neutral. But other than that, if you're writing a journal, or if you're reporting on news, or if you're writing about someone else's biography, whatever these literatures that you try to write, especially the narratives, you cannot be neutral technically. It's not possible. So these narratives, we cannot say any narratives are neutral. You do take a part, I mean the stand and the position, and you do it does involve interpretation of some sort, whether it's deep or shallow, it doesn't matter. Next word, opinionated, means you are inclined to have a certain opinion, or you have been influenced by a certain position or opinion. In that sense, all the four gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, John, Luke and John, they are certainly opinionated. They do have certain position and certain stand to defend. So this would be a very apologetic in nature. You know the word apology, right? Apology is saying I'm sorry. So they're the same root. Apologetic. But apologetic is not saying I'm sorry. It is saying I am a certain position and I like you to understand my position, and I want to persuade you to my position. That's what the apologetic is about. So it's trying to make your case or trying to explain your position so the others can not only understand, they will agree with you and believe you. So that's kind of apologetics. And four Gospels and the Acts of Apostles are all written. And indeed, the Bible itself is written with the apologetic position. Bible is trying to say God really exists. Not only He exists, God is trying to have that personal relationship with you, because God had created you, and He's not at fault. It is you who had disobeyed God and separated yourself from God. That's mainly what the Bible is saying. And either when you heard this kind of message from a Christian, a pastor, or someone, and then you have to respond, no, I don't think God exists. I don't believe so. And I think God is bad because all these things happening in the world, especially in the name of religion. And see, we heard just the news about the Hamas attacking Israel, right?
Yeah.
Both Hamas and the Israelites, they believe in the God, the same God. Even though the names are different, it's the same Old Testament God. And they are doing it in the name of religion. All these things have been going on thousand years, several thousand years. If you go back to history, that's in the Bible. Palestine, Samson kills Palestine with that bone of a kind of horse, and then he kills hundreds of them. And it goes back to that far, and it continues to revenge after revenge, killing one another in the name of God. So these things happens, and you ask, what kind of God allows these things to happen? So the Bible is trying to make a case. No, you misunderstand. It is the evil in you, and it is evil, the evil of Satan who is causing all these things. And we are responsible for all these bad things happening. Because God is good, and He cannot do all these bad things because He's good. And it's not only against His character, but logically saying, good cannot cause evil and bad. So that's the kind of rational argument from us Christians and believers. So it is apologetic, and the Bible by nature, it is written to argue this stand and position and point. And the gospel is no exception. So when you read the gospel about the story of Jesus and his life and his disciples, we assume, we know that it is opinionated, meaning there is a certain opinion and very strong, not certain, but very strong opinion about who Jesus is. And that opinion, the core of the opinion is this: Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph and Mary, is the son of a carpenter who happens to be also a carpenter. He is the Messiah. So that will be the main opinion that you'll find in the gospel. So if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, then your focus will be, okay, how Jesus, present himself through his life and through his ministry, the work that he indeed is the Messiah. So that will be the focus. And that will be the intention of the opinion of the author. If you're trying to read it otherwise, see him as a poor guy, a poor Jew who is an outcast in the town of Galilee. Town of Galilee is like a ghetto, like it used to be Harlem in New York, or Compton in Los Angeles. These are so-called ghettos. And he was born and lived and educated 30 years in that community. So you can look at him as a poor guy who had nothing, and eventually who's been killed by the Roman the authorities. Or you can look at him as a political figure who tried to revolt against the Roman rule and was subjected, being killed on the cross because of that crime. So that would be another kind of perspective. But they are, when you read from that kind of position, and then you are opinionated. And Karl Marx, who happens to be born in a very devoted Christian family and was educated in a Christian context, then he thought and focused on the very beginning of the church. They gave up everything and shared the community, and they evened the wealth amongst themselves. And he said, "Oh, this is communism." Now that's what where the communism came from, right? And also socialism. I mean, it's pretty much basically the same thing. Human being, every single one, try to share evenly and try to live happily ever after. But we know that doesn't work, and that never been successful in any of in our human history, ever before and even after. I mean, even first church, it did work for just a few years. Then later on, the church could not live up to that ideal and became corrupted and broken, and that's who we are. That's a human being. So whether it's a political idea or religious ideology or belief, even though idea itself is great and perfect and good, we know that idea is not going to be realized as we think. So that's why all the political system, whether it's communism, socialism, or democracy, I mean, no one on earth, well educated and with the right mind, would think that democracy would be a perfect solution politically and socially. We don't believe that. And the capitalism versus communism with the economic system, capitalism is not perfect. It does have its own fault and issues as well. So nothing on earth gonna be perfect, but least you can say which system is better than others, which system gives a more benefit to general population than other system. And we do have historically tested and know which one works better, even though it's not the best or perfect. Going back to opinion. So these positions, human positions, are opinionated in that sense, and the Bible is opinionated. We have certain position to stand and defend, and that's where the apologetic comes in. But and line third, judgmental and critical. When you read a certain literature or material, news, even the news, you don't just listen and digest as it is. As in you have your own opinion, your own position. You are being judgmental, and we are asked to be critical. The educational philosophy difference between, for at least my case, between Korea and America, and the American philosophy of education would be quite different in this perspective. When I was, in school, elementary, junior high, high school, and so on, even at the level of university, I was at university. I was a student when we had the May 18 Gwangju revolt, right? And I've gone through all that on campus. Still, in that kind of context, you are not educated to be critical. You just learn what the textbook and what the teacher and what your parents is telling you, and you were required and demanded to just perceive it and don't have any critical opinion against it. If you do, then you are labeled as bad kid, right? So that's kind of context that we were raised in. I believe it's the same thing in China and Japan. We were not educated to be critical. But in America, beginning from elementary school, even younger, they teach you to be critical, meaning you should have your own individual position and belief about the things. So the how you perceive the reality, the word obedience in our sense, in our culture, means you don't say nothing, just do whatever I tell you to do, and what the teacher tells you to do, and be the person what your mom and dad wants you to be. So that's called and understood and defined as obedience. But in biblical sense and in Western world, obedience is totally different idea. Same thing with humility, being humble. You are, you are trained and learned and educated to be humble. Same thing in the Bible. Bible teaches you to be humble. But even with the same word, the meaning is totally different. In Asian culture, in our culture, being humble is saying, "Oh, I'm nothing. I'm no good, and I'm always, under someone else's submission, and life should be you just being silent." That's not what the humble in the Bible. The only thing that you are to be humble is when God is present, and God and you are lower than God, of course. And with other human beings, humble means being nice, kind, and loving, and caring. That's what the humble means in the Bible. Because other person is also a very personal being, and he or she is valuable creation of God. So that's why we respect, and then respect and the being humble, it goes together. And so those are like a different kind of things that we see. It's not just Western and Eastern, but it's more like a biblical against what we have learned and been educated. So being critical, it is a must when you are studying and learning the Bible and the gospel stories. So I don't want you to just read and accept the story as it is written, because Jesus really walked on earth, on the water, or Jesus really healed someone, and was he really raising dead people? I mean, these are some of the questions, and you are to survey the passages with that critical mind. See, even as a believer, if you're just being brainwashed and manipulated, I would say at least 2/3 of the so-called Christians in Korean church, I can speak for Korean church, the so-called born believers, born as a believer. I mean, because parents or the grandparents are Christian, and you're born into Christian family, and you're born as a Christian. That doesn't happen. You don't born as a Christian. That never happens. You have to make your own personal decision to be a believer. But when you're growing up, I mean, you went to church from your mom's womb, and your first church experience is when you're 1 year old and you're baptized and so forth. Then you wouldn't probably had chance to be critical about your own belief. So those who call so-called Christian, many those nominal Christians are being brainwashed and they've been manipulated to believe in the thing, and that's not called belief. That's just an idea. It's an ideology, and it is something that you come with your background or your context, and that's probably more dangerous than being non-believer, because you think you believe and you think you're Christians, and actually you're not. And so I want every believer to be critical about his or her own faith, own belief. And there comes at least one point in your life as a believer asking yourself, is there really God? And am I just believing what I was told to believe? If that's the case, and that's pretty sad, and that's pretty dangerous, because Paul, the Saint Paul talks about the case like that, and he says, you're the poorest person on earth if you're that. And, okay. And when there's a narrative or story and drama, as you watch dramas, you become inclined to a certain character or sympathize with a certain characters or a certain episode. So being sympathetic, not sympathetic, it's a sympathetic, just forget about R. Sympathetic or inclined is a natural process or the effect of reading any story or watching a movie or drama. So what happens is a process of building up your perspective. But I don't want you to be told to be sympathetic or inclined. See, like I said, you need to be the Lord of yourself. In this sense, I don't mean that you just forget about God, but in making these decisions, you have to make your own personal, holistic decision about the truth, about the message, about the messiahship of Jesus, the Christ, of Nazareth. So that's the thing. These are the things that you want to end up with as you study the gospel and the life of Jesus Christ. Okay, learning and finding. See, any good student of Bible, especially when you are studying Jesus of Nazareth, we expect to learn and to find out. These are called findings. Whether you're doing a literature study or whether you're doing scientific study, the findings are the main objective or goal of any academic student. So we are here in this classroom to learn and to acquire findings. What you do with these findings are, your responsibility and your decision. But what we can do as a students of literature, in our case, is the Bible, and student of Bible is to come up with these learning or lesson or findings. So we'll continue on this. First, we're going to learn about something. We're learning about their reality or his reality in the case of Jesus. And we are learning about their belief, and in our case, it's Jesus' belief. And we're learning about their existence. So reality, again, so just keep this formula in your mind, and this is what it is. It is about the reality, about the belief, and about existence. As we study the narrative of Jesus, we are trying to focus on his reality. His reality was not that favorable. Not only he didn't have showers in his house, or refrigerator, television, all these things he did not have. He was poor. He was in a ghetto, very poor, and his job is a very low-paying job. I mean, today, if you're a carpenter or the stone smith, you are being paid a lot. But in the time of Jesus, it was one of the lowest paying vocations or jobs. So the poor, he had many brothers and sisters, which makes them more poor. And he wasn't formally educated. That's his reality. Even though his father, Joseph, was in the line of King David, what does it help him to survive? His existence still, economically, socially, was very poor. And the neighborhood, of course, it wasn't a good neighborhood. Even though the crime, it's not like today, but the economic-wise, it was very not so sanitized, dirty, poor. And about his belief, what did Jesus believe? And if you are calling yourself a Christian, who we are is that we are trying to follow the same belief as Jesus believed. We believe Jesus, but Jesus also had his belief about the reality, and about the existence, and about God, and about himself. So these are the things. What did he believe about? And we are trying to learn about these things. Once you find out, then your job as a student is to make your own belief decision, whether you believe it, whether you do not. So that's how we respond to the facts or findings. And then existence. He is existent. Why did he exist? How he existed his life, and how his existence ended. So these are just some of the things that we are looking for in the gospel. Okay, let's stop here and take a short break, 10 minutes, and we'll come back. All right, let's continue. Okay. So out your findings about these things. So that's basically how you study a narrative. Any narrative, you look at the reality of the person or people, and then you look about their belief, and then you look into their existence. So then you learn the things about it. Then you continue to look at their lifestyle. Lifestyle is a way of life, and each lifestyle, it does reflect who you are, what you believe. So when you look at someone else's lifestyle, then it is very visible evidence of what he or she believes. If someone enjoys driving a luxury car and have several different cars, well, it reflects his value. And if someone tries to get the best dresses, the name brand, then it reflects her values. So the lifestyle tells you about a lot. And we look at the lifestyle of Jesus and his disciples and the people around them. And we do have enough information to kind of picture and formulate the lifestyle of Jesus. So we can figure out how his lifestyle is from the gospel. And then humanness. Humanness, especially when we look at Jesus as the Messiah. Messiah has to be 100% human being, and he has to be 100% God. That's how the Messiah is projected in the Bible. So we look at the humanness of Jesus, his feelings, his agonies, and his way of empathizing or sympathizing with the people, and including his sinfulness. Is Jesus sinful? Did he sin? And was he tempted? These are some of the things that you look for in the life of Jesus. And we do read that Jesus was being tempted 3 major temptations right after he was baptized by John the Baptist. And it shows Jesus is a totally 100% a human. And he overcomes that temptation by basing on the Word of God. So these are the things that we look for. And we look for humanness in Peter. He failed, he made mistakes, and that's who we are. And we can identify with the Peter or Paul, even with those so-called evil bad characters, like Judas. He's a worst of the disciple. But there is a Judah in every single one of us. We cannot just finger, he's a bad guy. But, when you finger someone, we know that these 3 fingers are, pointing to yourself. So, it is, our responsibility and position as a reader and student of Bible to look into ourselves we do find Iscariot, Judas in ourselves. And then it's about their problems and issues and troubles and conflicts and so on. The list goes on, but we use the word problems to include all these. The human reality, as we experience, I mean, when you're about this age, the life is not so sweet, and it's not just happy. It has its share of problems. Whether you're rich, poor, whether you're man or woman, whatever your nationality is, it doesn't matter. Whether you're black, white, or Asian, we do have our own share of problems. It could be physical, it could be psychological, and it is spiritual. So all the dimension of human existence, it relates to the human reality. So the reality that we have will cause or affect the existence, that the problems here will cause problems in our existence. And we are to deal with these problems and issues. And the question is, how do you deal with the problems that are in reality? Many Christians today pray that the problem will go away, and that's not the design that we have today. The reality is the problem does not go away. Sometimes it does, but even if it does, it's temporary. It's going to come back. The problem's going to be there, whether you like it or not. It's not going to go away. So if you pray that the problems will go away, the probability of the answer to that prayer is very minimal. So when we face these problems in reality, the best prayer is, Lord God, please help me to either overcome or face the problems. You have to face problems. You cannot avoid it. So the prayer of avoidance is not a good prayer. Good prayer is, Lord, help me to overcome, meaning you have to go through these issues and problems. That's what the life is. And it is not God's fault of God, that we have problems. Again, the problems is our own making. We have caused our own problems. It's like someone drinking excessively and driving. And if you drink and drive, you're gonna cause problem. And if you drive like 100 miles an hour on a local street, and you're gonna cause yourself a problem. Same thing with our life. It's not like drinking and driving or driving 100 miles an hour on a local street, but still, whether it's obsession, or whether it's addiction, or whether it's the hatred, or whether it's a relational problem, these problems, the cause is usually, not always, but usually is within. And there are problems that you have not caused. Someone had to cause you a problem. And then the thing is, you cannot avoid. Many times you have to face, even though it's a problem caused by others, you have to face them. Same thing with Jesus. Jesus did not cause problem, except when he was facing the legalistic, so-called religious the leaders in Jewish culture, were the Pharisees and the priests and the scribes and these so-called religious leaders. He intentionally caused problems. Otherwise, he was usually the victim of the problems that others caused him. So we want to learn about what were the issues that Jesus had faced and had to face. And there were many of these problems. And as we read the Gospels, we try to identify and label these problems and name them and try to understand the nature of those problems. What it is, why did it happen, how did it happen, and how it affects and influence the person in the story, and then to Jesus. And we not only learn about, the next step is learn from. So these are some of the approaches. I mean, when you're doing any Bible study of the stories or even the letters written by St. Paul, our approach is we try to learn from those writings. First, in the stories, learn from their mistakes. It doesn't apply to Jesus. I mean, he did not make any mistakes. So that's not case of Jesus. But people around Jesus. For example, Peter denied Jesus 3 times just night before Jesus was crucified. So Peter himself, to learn from his own mistakes. And as we read, we do learn from his mistakes. We are vulnerable, meaning we are open to or available, vulnerable, weak to these pressures, and persecution sometimes. Some of our students are believers from the mainland China. And even though the Chinese constitution allow the religious freedom, we know there are certain limits and hindrance. And many Christian believers in China is suffering, still continuing. It's a present home, not the past. Suffering from persecution from the government and other authorities. So when we read these things happening in the gospel, those who are being persecuted or being pressured, they'll have the courage and they can identify themselves to the story. And those are the examples. So as we read the examples in the story, Jesus being persecuted, being forced, and being pressured, and being criticized, and even arrested, and being killed. Those gives examples, and we learn from it. And we don't, necessarily pray that these pressures to go away, but rather the early Christians who had faced these persecutions, they prayed that they'll overcome. Overcome doesn't mean that you avoid, but you go through. You go through those persecutions and stay still and do not deny Jesus Christ. So that's kind of examples. There are many, many examples on different realities, the situations, and we do learn from those stories. And the same thing we do in the story of Jesus. And Jesus in there is the example. The example. The example, we have many in the Bible, but Jesus is the example, and we try to learn from him because we are called Christians. Christians are the ones who try to imitate Jesus, the Christ. Then we also learn from their experiences or their existence. Experience is one of the most common forms or well-known form of existence. So we have something called life experiences, and then the biblical characters, the gospel characters, and the Jesus himself go through these experiences. These are the things that you take yourself into, and you are the one who is being acted on or acting out, and that's called experience. Someone said Christianity is the religion of experience, not the ritual. See, that says a lot, because most other religions, whether it's Buddhism or whether it's Islamic faith, it is more of a ritual. And we in Korea, we have a very long history of shamanistic belief. We call it indigenous religion. And in shamanistic belief, there is a shaman, and there are spirits, and they include the spirit of ancestor or ancestor worship. So these things kind of come together, and in that, there are certain kind of religious experience, but most of these shamanistic belief happens once or twice a year, or when you are in trouble, and it always is about rituals. There are certain rituals we call it kud in Korea. Kud is a very symbolic ritual of shamans. And sadly and unfortunately, many Christians today focus on the ritual rather than experience. I mean, I'm speaking of Korean believers. They go to church, they worship on Sunday, and that's it. Or they sometimes they do like something called quiet time, daily devotion, reading Bible every day. Still, that is a ritual. It's not an experience. And they think they are being good Christians because they follow certain rituals. They come to morning prayer at 5 a.m. every morning to the church and come there and pray. Those are rituals. I'm not saying rituals are bad, but if it doesn't extend or overflow or influence your experience or existence, daily existence, then it is just a religion. We don't, want Christian to be religious, but we want Christian to be spiritual, meaning everyday experience, daily experience, whether it's at home, whether it's your workplace, whether it's in your school. We want to be experiential, meaning exist. We want to exist as a believer, not just do the ritual, come to Sunday and be Sunday Christian. There are so many Sunday Christians, and it's sad. So when we look at the stories of Jesus, he wasn't never a ritualistic. For him, coming to the temple and then doing the sacrifice and keeping the Sabbath, these things were less important. I wouldn't say not important, but less important. More important for him is his daily living, the lifestyle, the way of living, the culture and social life existence is the key to his existence. I mean, if that was the case, if Jesus was not so much about doing the rituals or religious kind of things like a prayer, he did pray, but his prayer is quite different from the prayer that we exercise today. And his prayer was also a time of experience. He was experiencing God. It's not so much asking for things, but when you look at his prayer, he makes that conversation with God. And that's what the prayer is about. And today, if the prayer is so much of, asking for the things, asking for the result. And, it is a part of prayer, but that's not the primary part of prayer. The primary part of prayer is building that relationship with God and then experiencing God. And that's kind of godly existence or Christian existence. So when we look at Jesus Christ, his life and his work, we learn that he exists 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week. He exists as a being who's experiencing the divine God, the life. Okay. Next thing we learn is how. The Bible key to biblical message or biblical study, the gospel, is going to be why. We're going to talk about that later. But secondary thing is how. Okay, how they relate to God. See, the key to our study is how Jesus related to God and how his disciples and the people who were following Jesus related to God. Some did the right way, some did less right way, some did in wrong way. So we learn from both examples, good and bad. Good examples, we learn from it, and we look at how they did it, and we try to imitate, copy. So, how they relate to God is going to be the primary first subject, and especially when we are studying, since we are studying the life of Jesus, we want to look how Jesus related to God the Father. So the key word here for Jesus as he related to God is the Father. For him, it was not, he didn't address God as Yahweh. Rarely did that, but he used the two vocabularies to address God. And the way that he addressed God is how he related to God. And the number one will be Father. Number two will be the Lord. So Lord and Father, the Adonai and the Abba Father, Adonai, the Lord. These are the two words that are most recorded in the gospel, full gospel, as Jesus tried to address God. So what does it tell you? It tells you that's how Jesus related to God, the Father. So for us as believers, we continue to ask ourselves, is God my Father? That's very personal, intimate, open, honest relationship, right? That's what the Father is. And He is the origin and the cause of my being. See, without Father, we cannot exist. Without Mother, we cannot exist. So the Father language means that He is the cause of my existence. And He is the one who loves me. Loving Father. It would be the kind of the word that we can use. The Lord, it has to do with the authority, the power, and the obedience. And these are the words that associate with the Lord, L-O-R-D. So his life is based on God being his Father. His work or ministry is based on the God being the Lord. So these are the two key words and that how Jesus related to God. And we are to learn from and focus on as we read the gospel and try to learn the life of Jesus. We're gonna look into this. Second thing, how they relate to other believers. So these would be the actual categories of Christians as we try to pursue and make a Christian existence. So when we are talking about Christian existence, we look into these three dimensions. And if you're a teacher and leader or pastor in a church, local church, and when you are dealing with your members, your students, I look at these three categories: how he or she relates to God. And the secondary, how they relate to other believers. If this will be the if, but if someone is looking good, doing well in the relationship with God, coming to every Sunday, not missing a single Sunday, and even coming to every day for early morning prayer service, and being so diligent and religious, yet they may be not so well with the other believers in the church. He or she may be a troublemaker, causing issues and problems, being very critical and judgmental. See, this would be the common case especially in the Asian culture church. Being judgmental, and it always comes with being self-righteous. See, this is the most common problem that I find in a Korean church, whether it's in Korea or whether it's in in American, so Korean American church. See, we somehow this the Confucius ideal, the ideology, and the philosophy that we are educated in. I mean, please understand. I mean, no, in Joseon Dynasty we have like a 500 years of history, and out of those 500 years, most of it, major part of it, is based on the Confucius ideal and philosophy. That's how much we were, influenced and affected by Chinese kind of philosophy. And see, because of that, it has a very rigid kind of rank paradigm. So there is a certain rank, and then you are in that pyramid, power pyramid. And because of that, and then it is basically the Confucius ideal is very legalistic, meaning there are things that you do and that you don't. So basic teachings in Confucius teachings. I as you read the books, the writings of Confucius, basically it focuses more on the spirit and the idea, but later on, as people study them and practice them, it became very legalistic. Same thing happens with the Christianity. I don't think the Confucius as a philosopher and as a spiritual person, he did not mean to, but later on the people kind of interpreted it in a different way, and it became very legalistic. So you focus on what you do and what you don't, and what you see is actually who you are. That's how we look at a person. So it's easy for us because of the education and the culture, judgmental, and those who are judging people are self-righteous. And that many believers, especially the leaders, so-called elders, deacons, and even pastors, and this, I can speak for Korean church that I have experienced, they are very judgmental. And at the same time, they are self-righteous. They don't think and they do not know that they are being self-righteous. But the way they talk and the way they act, it tells exactly. I mean, it's not that difficult that you can tell that they are being very self-righteous. Meaning, they find the righteousness in their own actions. How many times that you come to Sunday in the morning, early morning service, or how much offerings that you make and so on. These are the kind of measurements that are visible, and when they are the one of those top ones who are contributing or giving offerings a lot to the church, and they have this social position as a the executive, or they are rich and have a lot of money, and then they are educated. So when these things come together and they are being praised in the church for their actions, then they become self-righteous. At the same time, they become judgmental. They begin to judge people. So that's one of the main things that divides the Korean church. So it's sad. So I look at those things, how they show they are sincere to God. The showing is not enough for me, but how they relate to other believers, especially the younger ones, it tells you what kind of character he is or she is, whether their belief is genuine or not. If someone is self-righteous, I cannot doubt whether he or she is really truly a believer. Number 3, that's another critical the category that we should learn how Jesus related to non-believers, other people. There are many believers, Christians, thinking that they are better than non-believers. That's never the case. And even many pastors teach this wrong doctrine, dogma actually. It's wrong thing to teach. Because if you are Christian, you're better than those non-believers. You're gonna go to heaven. You're gonna go to heaven. They are gonna go to hell. I mean, that's even if it's true. I mean, if they don't believe in Jesus, they're gonna end up in hell. I mean, that's true. But the way he or she says, the pastors say about it, is they're down-looking or ignoring or making them like a second-class person. I mean, whether you're a believer or whether you're not a believer, we are still the same sinners in front of God. And the people don't realize that. And then the pastors don't teach that. And because of that, there are those so-called Christians who are being rude, unkind to non-believers. You should never set those kind of people as a leader in the church. And unfortunately, many Korean churches that I've been to, these are the ones so-called leaders, elders, and even pastors. And they did not learn how Jesus lived, how Jesus existed, relationship with God, other believers, and especially those non-believers. He always has this sympathy and empathy and the mercy and grace toward those who are not yet believers. He has this compassion about them. That's how we should, face. Unless they are anti-Christ, knowingly and knowingly anti-Christ, then you will have different attitude. If they are like heresies, then you will have a different attitude to these people. But unless they are antichrist or heresies, then you are to relate them in the same manner that you will relate to other believers. So these are the things that we do learn from Jesus, the life of Jesus. Now, learn to apply. Once you learn from it, learn about it, and then that becomes so-called findings, like I said. It's a lesson. Lesson and findings. I mean, you don't want to just stop there. If you're a Christian, you don't stop there. Academic study. When you're doing academic study of Bible, you stop at the lesson and the findings. And then you don't relate yourself to those findings or messages. But if you're a believer and true Christian, you want to apply or integrate that learning and finding into your life. So, first, it's a devotional existence. Devotional existence is your relationship with God, your personal, your holistic relationship with God, the Father and the Lord. So that should come as in the form of existence, or form of experience in your daily living. So devotional existence does not mean, it includes, but it does not mean sitting in the morning, reading Bible and giving prayer for like 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And you think you've done your share of devotional life. And that's not true. That's not how it works. You have to live out. So other than your personal devotional time, it has to extend and go beyond that time frame. And your life should show amongst your work, your school, your home, your family, and so on, your friends. So that's how it should spill. Apply to ecclesiastical existence, meaning church life, church existence with other believers, the community of believers. That's where the application should happen. So without that happening, your life as a believer and your study on the life of Jesus Christ isn't just a study. It might be a good education, but that does not complete the study as a believer. So your church life should reflect what you have learned from your study of gospel lessons and the findings, the messages. Sure. Then missional existence. Missional existence means as a member of a church, you are dealing with what we call the world. World is another name for the reality. Where is the reality? Yeah, reality beyond Christian church. Not the local church, but the gathering of believers, unseen, the invisible identity of us as a community. So that church, you, including you, will exist amongst the world reality. The mission is what you do toward, sometimes against, and for the world. The world reality is unbelieving, non-believing existence of those who are without Christ, without Jesus. So every day, if you live in this reality, your existence causes you to interact with non-believing world. Sometimes it is pictured as evil, sometimes it is pictured as ignorant, sometimes it is pictured as the one who requires compassion, service. So the service the church provides toward the world is called mission. So missional life or missional existence is a must. It's not a choice. It's not for someone who is more dedicated. So the word missionary in English usually refers to those professional missionaries who go to overseas, like missionaries to China, missionaries to Africa or Latin America, somewhere like or even to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, and so on. There are missionaries. But those are, the one definition. But my definition of missionaries, or our definition of missionaries, should be all believers are missionaries. Not professional, we are not paid, but we should live a missional existence. It's not a choice, it's mandatory. It's a must, it's a duty. So these three dimensions of Christian life, it has to be all in balance. You don't just focus on the devotional life and just go to church and worship and say, that's it, I've done enough. No, that's not the case. You should be involved in your community of believers, and you also should integrate yourself with non-believing world, non-believers. So these three all has to exist at the same time. And without that balance, that fulfillment, the life as a believer is not going to be balanced. So we want a balanced Christianity and holistic Christianity, meaning everything included. You do not throw away certain things because of you have different ideas. So these are the things that you want to learn from studying the life of Jesus. Because when you study the life of Jesus, you're not just studying the life of Jesus himself or Jesus alone, but there are other people like disciples and Pharisees and Sadducees, and then the Roman soldiers and Roman authorities, the king and the government, the priest and the scribes, and so on. These are all different characters that make up or that build the story of Jesus as the Messiah. So at the end, we are asking this question: is he, Jesus, the Messiah? That will be the continuing question. And if he is the Messiah, what kind of life that he lived? So we like to follow and imitate the way he lived. So without application, our study is only halfway through. So the application is rest 50%. And you may not learn, you may not do the application in this classroom, but as we go out the classroom, out the door, and then the application begins. And you do your daily devotion every day, sitting and praying. And then once you've done with the sitting and praying and studying the scripture every morning, then you're going out the door to your workplace or your school, wherever you are. That's where this application occurs. And that's existence. So our existence as a believer does not stop at a church or your home or your devotional quiet time, but it has to go beyond that and should continue to build up. That's why we are doing this class. It's a school requirement, it's a classroom thing, but your real learning begins with your application. So that ends the lesson 1. We took 3 weeks to cover lesson 1, but as we go through, we are doing the study of the Bible at the same time, even though we not actually go into the Bible. So thank you again for the coming to week number 3, and I'll see you guys next week, and have a good day and good week.